Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Geek-Stew, and today, guys, welcome back to Horror Stew. That is right, today is yet again another wonderful Friday, and today, guys, we are doing another horror-related episode, of course. Today, guys, we're going to do another round of random horror movie from a random year. Honestly, I had a lot of fun doing it last week. I got a little more of, I feel like, more of an interaction with choosing the film and everything else, and it just felt a little bit different in a good way. So I really wanted to do it again. So here we go, guys. We're going to do that today. And someone actually mentioned to me last time that I did this that I was missing a decade. So I did from the 70s to present. So I did 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, but I forgot to include the 2020s. I forgot that we were already in a new decade, and yeah, so that definitely made me had a slight existential crisis just for a little bit. But we're going to do that again here today, guys. So we're going to first spin for the decade, and then we're going to spin for the year, but let's get into it. All right, so we got the spinner loaded up for the decade, so let's go ahead and give her a spin. Okay, it's spinning a little bit quicker this time. Maybe I tried to clear out some stuff on my iPad so that maybe it's not as bogged down. So it shows the 70s. Don't call me a cheater, but I want a different decade. Let's try not to do the same decade twice in a row. Maybe I shouldn't have included 70s at all. Who knows? I just didn't think it was going to land on the 70s. Okay, I can deal with the 90s, so let's do the 90s. We're gonna do with the 1990s. Now let's choose the actual specific year. All right, now we're gonna spin for the specific year. Give the spinner a spin. Let's let it go. Round and round it goes. Gonna choose the year that we try and find a specific horror film from, and we're gonna go with 1993. Okay, what a good year before I was born, but that's all right. Let's go with 1993. All right, so we're gonna do horror films from 1993. You guys can kind of see, don't mind my horrendous misspelling of horror films from 1993 at this top. So let's see, we got Body Melt, Trauma, Needful Things, The Dark Half, Return of the Living Dead 3, okay, Maniac Cop 3. Oh, Leprechaun. Ooh, that might be what we do. Puppet Master, Jason Goes to Hell, Hocus Pocus, not a horror film. Jurassic Park, I guess, depending on who you ask. The Good Son. Okay. I'm sorry, we gotta do it. We gotta talk about the Leprechaun. So if you guys have never seen the Leprechaun movie, you are really missing out. So the Leprechaun is a horror comedy from 1993. And it has I'll just give you the ratings real quick. It's a 4.8 on IMDb, 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 17% on Metacritic. So these ratings may deter you from wanting to watch this, but I assure you that if you watch this, you will be incredibly happy that you did. So it is, of course, a silly, goofy, kind of campy horror film. Of course, that's kind of implied when a movie is literally about a leprechaun. But guys, this movie has such amazing stuff in it. I mean, literally, this has the best shit on this earth. First of all, this is one of Jennifer Aniston's first actual films that she had ever done. Like, she had done some stuff prior, if I remember correctly, maybe TV-wise, but specifically, this movie had Jennifer Aniston as a young person. I mean, I think this was pre-Friends. I don't remember when Friends started. But, I mean, you have to think that this is probably one of Jennifer Aniston's first steps into the film world, which is insane. But not only that, but we have amazing entities, legendary actors like Warwick Davis. Warwick Davis obviously plays the Leprechaun. He is a little person. And then let's give you guys some ideas as to what Warwick Davis has done, because, of course, I'm sure that you have seen him before. He has done a lot of amazing stuff. But he was in Harry Potter, he was in The Hitchhiker's Guide, he was in Willow. I mean, he was in Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. There's actually, I didn't know this, but there's a Willow TV series that he's going to be in, which is incredible. He was in a lot of Star Wars movies. He was in Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. He was in Rogue One. He was in Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. I mean, I'm not going to read through all this, but he's been in so much stuff, and he is, honestly, Warwick Davis is a super funny dude. If you ever seen, like, interviews with him, super funny guy, has an incredible personality. Not only that, his acting chops are impeccable, and he is perfect as the Leprechaun, okay? I'm not kidding you when I say that they could not have chosen someone better, because his voice is iconic, okay? His look, iconic. Warwick Davis pulls it off. So the Leprechaun, we're going to talk about the actual film now. I'm going to stop gushing over how much I like Warwick Davis, but we're going to now kind of give you some synopsis about the Leprechaun movie, and then I'll give you guys some things that I liked, disliked, and then final thoughts. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and give you some plot here. So, brief plot synopsis according to Wikipedia. 1983, Dan O'Grady returns to his home in North Dakota from his trip to native Ireland, where he stole the pot of gold from the Leprechaun. Bad idea. After burning the gold, O'Grady discovers that the evil Leprechaun followed him home and murdered his wife. O'Grady uses a four-leaf clover to suppress the Leprechaun's powers and trap him inside a crate. Before he can burn him, he suffers a stroke. 10 years later, J.D. Redding and his teenage daughter Tori rent the O'Grady farmhouse for the summer. Contract workers Nathan Murphy and his 10-year-old brother Alex and his dim-witted friend Ozzie Jones help repaint the farmhouse. While looking in the basement, Ozzie hears Leprechaun's cry for help and mistakes him for a little child. He brushes the old four-leaf clover off the crate, freeing the Leprechaun. After failing to convince the others he met a Leprechaun, Ozzie spots a rainbow and chases it, believing he'll find the pot of gold at the end. So, basically, that's kind of the general synopsis of how the movie starts and basically everything else. Obviously, from this point forward, everything else is plot related and it's very much a spoiler, so I won't read too much farther, but that's a good idea of how the story starts. Basically, someone from the past goes and steals the Leprechaun's pot of gold from, did it say Ireland? It did. So he stole a pot of gold from Ireland. He brings it back, and the very intro star is actually really interesting because you see the dead wife and you see him trying to burn the Leprechaun, trying to destroy him finally. But then he has a stroke, suffers like a random stroke. Obviously, I don't think it was random. I think there's probably some things that probably played into it. Of course, having an evil Leprechaun running around your house would be definitely one that would play into it. That being said, later on, 10 years later, we have a little bit of a time jump. You have J.D. Redding and his teenage daughter Tori being Jennifer Aniston, rent the farmhouse for the summer. And then, of course, you have the contract workers that are there. They call him dim-witted, but I feel like that's very much of a dated term because he's just kind of, he is probably some sort of delay developmentally. But regardless, they, from that point forward, start to have interactions with the Leprechaun. And then, of course, they have a whole lead up to how they try and defeat the Leprechaun and so on and so forth. But now we're going to kind of talk about some things that I liked, disliked, and then final thoughts. So some stuff that I loved about this film, what didn't I like about this film? So first and foremost, like I mentioned, the actors in this film are great. Jennifer Aniston, young Jennifer Aniston, of course, always amazing. In addition to that, you have the wonderful acting chops of Warwick Davis. Warwick Davis does an amazing job, as always. There are obviously some other great actors in this film who continue to supplement what's going on. But not only that, the content of the film, the story is actually pretty great. Definitely the film itself is kind of goofy and slapstick and a little silly at times, but it's also very horrifying. And honestly, I think what a lot of people like to look over about this film is that the first film was good. Okay, obviously they had some additional films afterwards, such as Leprechaun in the Hood or Leprechaun in Space. But who doesn't love a horror character that goes to space? I mean, Jason did it, right? So you have that, which kind of, I guess, to some people diminishes the quality of the film, which I understand. But if you look at the first film just by itself, it is a funny, hilarious, scary at times horror film that gives you the best of all worlds. And I think that's what you really need to look at, is that, you can get a really good movie out of it, but you really just have to look at it from the perspective of, I know this is going to be silly, but I know this is going to be fun. It is a fun horror film, and no matter what anybody says, this will probably always want to be one of my go-to horror films. If anybody has never seen it, I say go for it, because the Leprechaun, it really, really, really gives you a depiction of something hilarious and, just in my opinion, super fun. But kind of to go back to a little bit of what I liked about it, of course, the actors are great, the concept is great, and the film itself is great. But not only that, it does a sort of what I would say is a lesser known trope of leprechauns, that leprechauns are evil. Leprechauns typically are depicted as like Lucky Charms, right? But in historical context, leprechauns are generally depicted as very mischievous, evil creatures, and I feel like this does a very good way of showing that. And obviously, the look of the leprechaun is incredibly grotesque, and it's great in a sense of the leprechaun is grotesque looking, is scary looking, but it's also funny because he likes to have fun. He uses his magic and to cause, trouble and issues. But at the end of the day, he's still a leprechaun. He's there to find his pot of gold, and that's what really matters to him. So some stuff that I didn't like about the Leprechaun. There's actually not a whole lot that I didn't like about this film. I will say that, of course, with all films that are campy, there's always the issue of how campy is too campy. And there are some points in this film that it feels a little tongue-in-cheek, but I do think that the film overall is good. I will say this, however, that I feel like they could have done better with some of the writing. Some of the writing, I feel like, because there's two different types of, I'll use the phrase cheeky. So you can be funny, you can be characteristic, and you can be colorful, but then you get to a point where you're kind of encroaching on a area where you're getting a little too cheeky, if you get what I mean. And sometimes this film does that. Sometimes this film jumps over the line and it starts to encroach on a territory of like, wow, we're getting into some really weird shit. And so sometimes it does that. Sometimes it gets a little weird or a little odd, but I mean, it's a movie. It happens. Sometimes the characters or the development of the film, there are sometimes some periods where maybe it could have been done differently, but at the end of the day, it's the movie. It is what it is, right? So that kind of is one of those things where when you're watching the film, you're going to see portions or scenes or just moments where sometimes you're going to think, okay, that was pretty unnecessary. But most of the time, the film is doing well. It was very well thought out and well planned to an extent, of course. But that being said, I do want to give some final thoughts on this, and I'll kind of elaborate a little bit more on everything else. But that was some stuff that I liked, and then some stuff that I didn't like. And now, of course, it's time to give you guys my final thoughts on the film, The Leprechaun. So as far as 1990 horror comedies go, The Leprechaun is definitely going to be one of my favorites. Obviously, there are some great horror comedies that happened in the 90s and some previous years, of course. But certainly The Leprechaun is one for the ages. Leprechaun is just so creative and it's so funny, and it's just one of the most, I would say it's one of the more colorful entities that I've probably ever seen depicted on TV. I feel like this is a more classic adaptation of what a leprechaun is, because like we talked about, leprechauns are more historically supposed to be mischievous, not necessarily evil all the time, but they are very mischievous fairy tale creatures. And I feel like this film definitely takes that to the umpteenth degree, so that's great. I love it. Do more of it, but don't do more of it like you have done, because like I said, they've done some really weird shit, like, Leprechaun in the Hood, Leprechaun in the Hood 2. There are a dozen other ones that they've done. And the Leprechaun series, I feel like now is more of a joke. People make Leprechaun movies just to be funny at this point. Most of them are straight to DVD anymore. But this one specifically was a theatrically released movie. It was in 1993. And like I said, this has Jennifer Aniston, and I just saw this, but this was in fact her film debut. So this has sort of a historical significance as well, because Jennifer Aniston is a fantastic actress, and she's done so much over the years, and this is her first movie, so I mean, you kind of have to appreciate that a little bit. But in addition to that, the Leprechaun is just great. Warwick Davis is an incredible actor, and he does his part in making a very comedically horrifying movie villain. And that being said, this film, in my opinion, 7 out of 10, easy. I mean, I'll give it a couple knocks off for some things that are a little tongue-in-cheek and a little over the line a little bit. Maybe not necessarily over the line per se, but they are a little over Judaism when it comes to comedic takes and everything else. But I'm going to stop ranting there, because I love this movie, and if I could, I would talk for hours about how much I like the Leprechaun movie. But that being said, if you guys did enjoy this film, or this movie, I should say, or not this movie, this episode, what am I talking about? If you enjoyed this movie, or this episode, watch the movie. If you also enjoyed this episode, give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a follow. Follow us on social media. Our social medias are in the description and at the end of the video. But like I said, watch the movie Leprechaun. I promise you will definitely enjoy it. I promise. You will probably like this movie. But this movie is great. Watch it. If you don't like it, leave a comment down below why you didn't like the film. Or go ahead and go to Twitter and say, Ike, I hated the Leprechaun. Here's why. I want to hear from you. And as always, guys, if you want to join the Geek-Stew crew, reach out to us on our social medias, and we will let you know, because we definitely want to expand our product, and we're always looking for new people to make new stuff. So have a wonderful rest of your day, guys, and a wonderful weekend, and we will see you again on Monday. Stay safe, stay happy, stay awesome and healthy, and we will see you in the next one. See ya.